Well, I am showing 12 o'clock. It is noon. It is November 14th. And we've got a subject matter that is pertinent to everyone. Not everybody's going to want to necessarily hear what we're discussing today, but at some point, you got to know what's going on with this. And more importantly, what does it look for us in the future? So I put a pretty basic PowerPoint to keep me on track and make sure that we get through the key parts of what we've got going on. So what we're going to cover today is simply the NAR settlement, okay? With that, it's the history. And is this change? There it goes. Okay, there's quite a delay right now. We're going to go history. I think it's important that we go back and go a long ways back to be able to understand how we've got to where we are. We want to take a look at the decision that was rendered by the courts regarding this class action lawsuit that came out. I'm sorry. And then what are the basic requirements? What are the changes that we're going to see based upon what this decision was? How then we really need to understand, are we compensated? How have we been compensated? How are we compensated? We're going to look at a presentation. Now, we're not going to get in depth in anything in regards to presentation, but just cover a few of the things that you'll probably have to get a little bit more involved in when it comes to presentation, both sellers and buyers. And then in particular, what is the paperwork going to look like? What's going to potentially and likely change for us, in particular with the buyer? So history, pre-1995, okay? There was no agency disclosure prior to 1995. All real estate agents were deemed to have been representing the seller. So prior to 1995, if you were working with a buyer, you were automatically representing the seller. No agency disclosure was out there. There was an issue with that, and that was that when they did a survey, they found that most buyers thought that the agent represented the buyer. The buyer thought the agent working with the buyer represented the buyer. More importantly, when you ask the sellers, they say, well, who do you think the agent working with the buyer was representing? Most of them said it was the buyer. The scary part is who do you think the listing agent was representing? And it was a surprisingly large amount of how many sellers thought that the listing agent was representing the buyer. Why do I bring that out? Well, that's what came about, or what brought about agency disclosure, and along with that then, buyer representation. Now, again, staying pre-1995, compensation, obviously, if both parties were representing the seller was paying the compensation. Although, when you got down to it, it's still done the way that we do it today. Now, I'll hold on that and I'll bring it back around. So 1995, NAR was a big proponent behind agency disclosure to all parties to a real estate transaction as to who represented who had to be done in writing. And as we know, my words is this, that we must disclose in writing prior to the exchange of any confidential information whom the parties represent. Who does a realtor represent, or more appropriately, who does a real estate agent represent within that transaction? Now, with that came along with buyer agency. And guys, just like now, there's a whole lot of scuttlebutt going on about there as to what's going to happen. Gee, it's going to wipe out buyer agency and all of this stuff. There were all these major concerns that came around with it. And people changing the way that they did business because of what they were reading into. what was going to happen because this was a major change. Well, in the end, nothing changed other than one thing. We had to disclose in writing who we represented. Because of that, buyer agency is now, matter of fact, it's everyday practice. 99% of the time, probably 99.9% of the time, when we are working with a buyer, we actually represent the buyer. And if any of this is confusing, then we've got to do more agency courses to understand this. But most of the time, we represent the buyer. All right? So that's what's changed. Now, the compensation was the same because pre-1995, the listing broker took a listing. They offered compensation to the buyer's broker, the broker who brought the buyer to the transaction. Post-1995, the listing broker offered compensation to the broker who brought the buyer to complete a transaction. I think if you replayed that, it pretty much sounds the same thing, and that's because it is. The only difference that changed was in the MLS, it now said, well, for a sub-agent, you'd get. For a buyer's agent, you would get. For a non-agent, and really we're talking agency relationship, sub-agency, buyer agency, non-agency, we will and have now since 95 promoted what you would get should you bring a buyer being a sub-agent, a buyer agent, or a non-agent. It's been out there since 1995. So now that this court decision has come down, and yes, NAR has appealed it, it's probably going to be 2, 3, 4 years before it is final. But what we know is there will be some changes. So what does 2024 look like? Well, let's talk about the decision first. What was determined is that NAR, the National Association of Realtors, basically was found guilty of, I don't know if the word's corruption, price fixing is definitely one of the things that they brought into there because of the way that we've always done business. And they said, well, you owe 1.8 million. Now, who's going to get this money? Probably most of it's going to go to the attorneys, the individuals who are doing what they told us we can't do. I mean, think about that one with really what the attorneys have done with this and that they're getting the money. Okay. So first part of it is NAR, you got to pay 1.8 billion. NAR is saying, look, no problem, but we're going to appeal this. We're going to look for more settlement, so on and so on. Here's the other part. It's my understanding is somewhere through the code of ethics that we were actually required to offer compensation. Now, it didn't say how much, which basically means we could have offered, or you could have been offered, zero when you get down to it. There are brokers who are out there who have been promoting to sellers that look, list with us, we only charge blank, and they give away, say, 1% is compensation to the buyer's agent. That's been existing. Guys, we've all seen compensation offered at different levels, which is part of the confusing part to me. But again, we're only looking at what's happening in our area. We don't know what is going on throughout the United States. So in some parts, it's just difficult to understand how this decision could ever come down. Bottom line is that NAR, I believe, will not be able to offer compensation. All right, that's a big part. Or let me rephrase that. Will not require the offer of compensation. Cooperation, yes, we will probably continue to be required to offer cooperation to all realtors, not all real estate agents. Okay. We will not be required to offer compensation. Essentially, that would mean this. Somebody go out and list a broker, submit it to the MLS, and offer zero in regards to compensation. Here's another thing that will come out. Many brokers or agents have advertised, again, remember this is national picture. You haven't seen it around here a whole lot. But I'm sure the statement of a buyer's agent doesn't cost anything. There's no cost to the buyer. Why? Well, because our offer of compensation, the way that we have always been paid. We can no longer, will no longer be able to advertise, promote, or even say that the buyer's agent is free. Can't do it anymore. Not under the terms of how we are doing compensation. We're going to have to disclose that the service fees are negotiable, that they're not set by law, blah, 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 blah. And I'll be showing you that on what is going to be a very close likeliness to what we will go to in regards to our agency or our buyer agency, our buyer representation contract. You'll see what that is. Likely, this will be interesting. It's likely that the offer of compensation will be made and promoted in public sites. So anywhere the franchisor of Century 21, of Coldwell Banker, has already said that they will post the offer of compensation to public sites where it's capable of doing that. I mean, if so, let's use Zillow, as much as I don't like it, but Zillow. When Zillow makes it public, we will promote what the offer of compensation is. Now, I believe this is a key, because everybody's going, well, what do you think is going to happen? But no, those are some of the key changes. All right. Now, are these fees negotiable? From a company perspective, no. Well, sure, you could pay more. We're not going to take any less, becomes the bottom line. We believe that we're still worth the fees that we have charged, and that's not going to change. Okay. We're worth what we're worth. But now to understand a little bit more, why? I want you to think about how we actually do get compensated. In a bit of this, in how we do settlement, or how the paychecks and the money flows, probably was a bit of the issue as to why the courts went in the way that they did. But let's think about this. You go out, you take a listing. You get the seller to sign an exclusive right to represent, and we'll use the assumption of 6%. So there is an exclusive right to sell that says we, the broker, receive 6%. Now, then we go out and we procure a buyer. And we sign a contract with that buyer that says, buyer, you owe me 3%. We'll use that number. We'll keep ourselves very generic, even though we're really one company. So there's an exclusive right to sell of 6%. A buyer representation contract that says the buyer will pay the buyer's broker 3%. And then you need to know that your membership to the MLS, under our brokerage, there's an agreement that says that when you offer compensation, whatever you promote, advertise is what you will pay. Okay? So the reality, if we just look at these three things, here's what should be by what the paperwork says. The seller's going to pay the listing broker 6%. And because of our membership to the MLS and that offer of compensation, if they said it's 3%, then the broker would then write a check to the selling broker who will then give that credit to the buyer against what the buyer was to pay. Now, that's the way it's all written, right? I mean, think about it. Again, the way it's written, not the way that it gets done, but again, it's part of the problem. There's a listing agreement, 6% to the listing broker. Listing broker, through their participation in the MLS, says, I'll offer you. They write a check. Again, they write a check based upon what the agreements are to whoever the broker is that brought the buyer. And because that compensation was the same as what the buyer was supposed to pay, the buyer would then have to pull no money out of their pocket per the contract. Now, that's the way the paperwork is. But of course, here's what we know when we get to the settlement and we look at the closing statement. What does it show? The listing broker didn't get 6%. They only got 3% or whatever they agreed to. And the listing broker didn't pay us. They didn't give us a check. The seller gave us a check. So that's the way the settlement statement showed. And again, I believe that's part of the issue, because then who paid the buyer broker? The seller did. Where was that agreement? Didn't exist. Still doesn't. And won't in the future either. So I want you to see that there's what is in the paperwork, how that should flow based upon the paperwork, and then the reality of the way that it has worked for closings and closing statements. Let's look at the next part here. I don't foresee compensation changing. You go, wait a minute, Darwin, you just said everything that you said. The courts have decided that they said that the buyers got to figure it out on their own, that they need to negotiate and figure out their own compensation with their broker. What do you mean it's not going to change? I want you to think about this. In the past, if you've been at this for a while, there was an objection handling technique that would go, seller, you don't want to offer any less. That would be silly. And I won't go into the detail of that, but that existed and there was a reason for it. It was because why would an agent want to show that property when they could get paid more by this seller? That was the way that objection handling technique went. And it was logical. But with buyer agency, that really kind of had to take out that objection handling technique. Well, let's think about that, because now what's going to go on is when you sit with the seller, you're going to say, I get 6%. I'm going to give away 3%. Highly likely that that's what's going to be in the future. And by the way, in the near future. We're going to actually have written disclosure and agreement that of the 6, we'll give away X to the broker who brings us the buyer. Otherwise, that offer of compensation. So let's say some broker goes, hey, wait a minute, there's an opportunity for me here. I can promote that my structure is, we'll say, 3%. You walk in the door and say, I get 6%. They're going to use that perception. They're going to say that, look, let the buyer pay their buyer's broker. Put it on their shoulders. Why should you pay? Count on it. I really believe that's going to happen. There's going to be a small amount. But now the buyer having these offers of compensation of a seller offering to pay 3% for a buyer broker's fee. So as a buyer, I can see I've signed up with this agent and their broker to give them 3%. And there's a seller that is openly telling everyone that they'll pay that fee. So now the buyer goes, well, House A is offering a 3% to pay my broker. House B is offering 0. Might the buyer decide not to look at that house? Logically, right? Now, will buyers think logically? I don't know. But if I'm in their shoes and this is being promoted this way, then that's saving me having to find 3% to pull out of my pocket. So what do I see? Not much of a change. Might end up actually costing buyers more money because, guys, what have we done right now? We've signed them up for 3%, and then there's a broker that offered 2% for compensation. How often did we go pursue that additional amount? I can tell you it's next to never. We've accepted what has been offered. Future, I believe we're going to go and ask for the full amount because we now, for the buyer, as you take a look at this slide, I want you to see that we're probably, and I'm going to encourage, that we actually treat a buyer the way that we would a seller. When a seller says, hi, I'm thinking of selling, we go meet them. We take a look at the house. We get face to face. There's a presentation. There's a disclosure that says, I represent you. By the way, sign this contract. What should we and what do I foresee coming? The days of us doing our disclosure and getting our agency contract at the time that we write the purchase agreement, it's going to be gone. Hear me on that. The days of getting agency disclosure done and the agency contract signed at the time of an offer is going to be gone. We're going to have to begin treating buyer prospects the way that we would treat a seller prospect. Meaning, let's get together. Let me show you what I do. A question to a buyer, are you familiar with the techniques that I use to help buyers buy their new home at the lowest possible price? Are you familiar with how I even look for homes, preferably homes that aren't even on the market? Because if we do that and we can find one that's not on the market, it's likely I'm going to save you thousands of dollars. We're going to have to earn the right. We're going to have to interview with buyers, and we're going to have to disclose. My fee is negotiable. It can go up. Okay? But you need to know that they're not set by law by the Board of Realtors or anyone else. My fees are set by me and my broker. So, yeah, they're negotiable. How much would you like to pay over 3%? I don't know if you'd ask that or not, but I'll tell you, there are, as we get in and keep moving and we get a few of these classes out for understanding how to work with buyers, you'll get it. So what else do we have? We're going to go to a long form. This started actually a few months back when talking with legal counsel Rick Linnell regarding, is a buyer agency contract worth the paper it's written on? And essentially, Rick said this to us. Oh, it's very much worth it. I've been in court getting fees for my brokers from buyers who were in default and owed that money. Yes. Now, they got to be properly completed. You had to do everything that you were supposed to do right. But yes, the only thing he said was, give me something to be able to work with. And I said, so if you're talking a 1-page versus the shortened version versus a 3-page, he said, look, there's one out there that the NAR, the Michigan Association of Realtors, has used. He said, that was a good one to be able to start with. So let me share with you what that may look like. I got to make sure I get the right page. Should be right here. So already I have made an adjustment in the packages because the MLS, MAR made an adjustment to the exclusive right to represent the buyer agency contract. They've already made an adjustment due to the decision that was rendered from the courts. So what we're used to is this short form. I have today updated, this has been in here forever, but I have updated this form right here. So this is the package that you have in Remind Docs. If you are part of a board where we're using Transaction Desk, I'll make sure that those are getting updated ASAP also so that you have this long form. This long form is not required yet. Let me say that again. It is not required yet. It is likely, as the leadership team continues to see what's going on, that we go to the long form as a requirement that short form will be removed. Okay? So I want you to know what this form actually looks like. So let me go to a transaction. Here we go. We'll use this one. And within that, I'm actually going to add the NAR form for the disclosure of agency relationships. Come on. It's moving on me too fast. Hardwood floors and heels just aren't quiet. If you heard that in the background, let's see. All right, am I missing it, you guys? Not I'm looking for disclosure. That's why. JJ1, sorry. I didn't get my focus correct here. So I'm going to add this form to the package. Open it up. And the first thing you're going to notice, this is a 3-page form. You're going to go, oh my Lord, 3 pages. Holy cow, that's a lot of stuff to fill out. Nope. As you can already tell, most of it is going to fill in automatically. It's really hard to put dates in. We get that, right? Okay. Here's what you're going to see, some key parts, and this is the first one. We are a designated agency firm. What that means is only the agent who's been designated to represent, in this case, the buyer, is the only one. Them and the supervisory named broker, which, again, as we know, that is your manager. So that's a key part to this. Broker and buyer hereby designate the agent named above as the buyer's designated agent. Buyer shall have no agency relationship other than with the broker designated and a supervisory broker. So even if you get anybody else from my company, treat them as the enemy. Don't talk to them, right? That's kind of what we did. So then we get to this point of the property. This is new. What I would tell you is don't be overly specific. We're describing in simplicity, in narrowing the scope of our search, because you're licensed in the state of Michigan. Do you really want to be held responsible to know everything potential for that buyer in the state of Michigan? So we're going to limit the scope of that search and the responsibility that goes with that. I always say be generally specific, but not too specific. See, if you put a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Clarkston, and they bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in Lake Orion, you may not have earned your commission. So be generally specific. It could be Northwest Oakland County. It could be Southeast Macomb. I mean, general, so that you limit the scope of your responsibilities. Keep it simple is the way I'm going to put it there. You've got the exclusive agency, compensation of the broker. Now, if this doesn't say, look, we've got lots of ways that you can compensate me. You could even, you got enough buyers, they're falling off, just waiting to work with you. Take a retainer fee. Collect a retainer fee. Get it right up front. They won't leave you. You could work hourly. You could work with a flat fee. If you do any of these three, because it's going to be brand new to you, talk with your manager. Here's the one that we're used to. We're going to get a commission. In the event buyer contracts to purchase the desired property, buyer will pay broker a commission equal to blank % of the purchase price. Commission is due and payable upon closing, provided, however, that immediately, provided that commission term of this agreement or during any extension of this agreement. The commission obligation will also apply to purchase agreements executed within, well, that's protection period. Protection period on a listing, we do 180 days, 6 months after the expiration or termination of this agreement. So don't try to cut me out of what I've earned. Catch this. Credit. So we just said, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you're responsible for paying me. We'll continue to use the 3%. It then says, I'll give you credit, as it puts here. Buyer will receive a credit against any amount owed pursuant to paragraph 5, the above, for any commission paid to the broker by the seller or the seller's listing broker. Everybody good with that? You're going to get a credit. Now, I can't say otherwise I'm free, because I'm not. I am getting paid. Yeah. So let's read this again. Buyer will receive a credit against any amount pursuant to the paragraph 5 above. So I'm going to give you credit for anything that I get from other parties, in particular, paid by the broker or the seller's listing broker. Oh, wait a minute. Now, calculate that. Nothing's changed. You do realize nothing's changed. It's the way we've always done it. A little loose on it because we've never always collected the full amount that we've said you're responsible for paying me, because often we've taken less. Occasionally we kept more. But it's just saying, look, you owe me 3, and anything I get from the seller or the seller's broker, the listing broker in our terms, we'll credit toward that 3%. Well, yeah, so the question came here in the office is this. Darwin, I'm going to rephrase what you said, Paula. Darwin, what if the listing broker gave us 4%? You had a contract that says 3. Paul has actually done the math here. Wait a minute. So my buyer, Taylor, signed a contract saying I get 3%. She bought a house where the seller, Paula, had an agreement with her broker to compensate 4%. Now, if she owes me 3 and I get 4, well, 3 gets credited toward, so she now owes me nothing, but there's 1% left over. Who gets that? We'll be writing this in such a way that we can actually take that. So I'll let you know that. But as it's written, what is my belief? Look, I'm not an attorney, but the last I knew, 4 and 3, and if you credit these 3 toward these 3, that leaves 1 credit. They got an excess. Think about buyer representation. Isn't that the buyer's money? I believe the way it's written, it would be. We'll be writing this in such a way that we're actually going to be able to keep whatever is what we say and above. Okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me make sure that we understand that little protection period right here. So in this case, it's not days, but months. We'll want to remember that. It's from the date of the expiration of your buyer representation contract. For 6 months is what we're going to have you use. If you go buy something else that we exposed you to, we get paid. It's the same as it would be on the seller side. So on the seller side, from the expiration of the exclusive right to sell, 6 months, you can't sell it to anybody that we exposed to, unless you've signed up with somebody else. So then all of that goes away. Commission obligation will apply to purchase agreement executed within 6 months after the expiration or other termination of this agreement. So from the expiration, termination, you can't buy anything that we showed you within 6 months. But if the property acquired was presented to buyer during the term of this agreement. So pretty much the same thing. Now, let me just check real quick, see if anybody had some other questions here. Do you anticipate brokers shifting their attitude toward enforcing the buyer-broker agreement? Oh, John, great question. So John put this in here. With the eventual change, do you anticipate brokers shifting their attitude toward enforcing the buyer-broker agreement and going after the total, I'm going to add, John, to the total commission due? Absolutely. Because we're no longer going, oh, here's the purchase agreement, sign all this stuff, knowing that most people don't actually read it, they just sign it. If we're doing it properly, we're covering that with them. Yeah, we're going to make sure, and I think that will give you the opportunity. Yeah, Bill,
Can you recap that, Darwin? John's question and then the answer.
Yeah, so again, what John put in the chat, with this eventual change, do you anticipate brokers shifting their attitude toward enforcing the buyer-broker agreement, meaning I'm going to get my 3%. I'm not going to live whatever the listing broker offered. I'm going to get my 3%, however it may be. And that's what he's asking, going after the commission due. So in other terms, here would be a common one. We sign them up for 3. The listing broker is promoting 2. So we're only going to get 2 from the listing broker. We're short 1%. The exclusive right to sell, or right to represent, I should say, the exclusive buyer agency contract says you owe me 3. I'll give you a credit from the listing broker, the seller. Looks like to me we're short one. Buyer, how do you want to get that to me? I believe that we will be pursuing those shortfalls now.
You think
And the
these
reason
things,
being, yeah, go ahead, Bill.
you think these will just be added into closing cost type of things, or?
I see it a couple of ways. One would be this. Sorry, guys, I just recognize you don't see that. All right, you guys know it all anyway. My gang here is not seeing what you're seeing. How do I put this? We're really just giving ourselves the authorization to be able to do it because, again, think about what we've been doing. We go find them a house. We disclose our agency as part of the paperwork. We go, oh, here's this one-page form. You got to sign. It says, I represent you. They don't read either one of those. They just go click, 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 signing the paper. With where we're going, that we're going to have to make an actual presentation, interview for the job of representing that buyer. They're going to now know what it is that they're signing. And it can't just be thrown in with all of the other paperwork. So if there's a shortfall, how are we going to get it? I'll throw it out this way. If you were to go show a for sale by owner, how have you got your compensation on that for sale by owner transaction? Simply, we'd write it into the agreement. The buyer, now hear me with this, the buyer, as part of their offer to the seller, probably said something to the nature of seller to pay buyer's broker's fee of 3% of the purchase price. That's how we collected it. Now, that's the easy way, and it's the way that we've always done it. As a matter of fact, let's say I was one of those gutsy real estate agents who signed a contract with a buyer for 3%. A selling or a listing broker only offered 2.5%. And I wanted to get my other 0.5%. I would simply say, buyer, I'm only getting 2.5% from them. So how do you want me to get, or how do you want to pay me the other 0.5%? Would you like to just bring that as part of the closing costs the day of closing? Well, gee, what are our options? Well, you could ask the seller to pay 0.5%. The buyer could ask the seller to pay that 0.5% shortfall. Okay. Now let me throw one other thing out. Let's say this really goes crazy and that we no longer have compensation offered through the MLS. Again, now hear me. Let's pretend that everything goes crazy and somehow we can no longer offer compensation. How would you get it? Well, the ways that we just discussed. And here's the other part to it. Mortgage companies, the bankers, the lenders, the investors that are out there who give this money to be able to buy and loan homes, they're getting that thought in process. What if? I want to be able to say, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Like I say, that's getting crazy. But how can you tell because you read the headlines. Oh my gosh, buyer representation is going to go away. I've actually seen that one. Why would a government tell a buyer that you can't be represented? I mean, let's think logically. That is nuts. Now, Can every buyer find 3% additional in their pocket? No. We're going to find a way. And by the way, I'm going to say this. This is the gray, okay? Gray, everybody hear me, gray. The seller doesn't pay the commission. And neither does the buyer. I should see faces on this one. If that buyer and seller don't come together, there's no transaction. There's no transaction, there's no commission, there's no compensation. Who really paid it? Both of them. They shared it. In some cases, the sellers pay more than buyers, yeah. Other cases, more buyers pay than, yeah. Look, it's the transaction. We've just complicated it. And everybody goes, but yeah, but this is what's happening. No, look at the paperwork. Great. Guys, we'll get paid. We will be compensated. You'll have to actually have value with these buyers. I think the aspect of us sitting back on our butts, waiting for the home to come up on the MLS, I think those days are gone. You've got to actually tell them what you're going to do and how you're going to earn your compensation. Real estate's still real easy. It just requires a lot of hard work. Okay. Hopefully that cleared that one up. Buyers are already having a difficult time with down payment, closing costs, safety net, funds for prepaids. Yeah, this is true, Nancy. And all of a sudden, we're going to expect them to pay an additional 3%. That's the part where I'm saying, don't worry about it. I just can't see it happening. As real estate goes, so goes the economy. We've already increased the interest rates to between 7 and 8. Millions of people have been pushed out of the market. How many more do we want to push out? And does anybody want to really take a pay cut? Again, we've got to just look logically. They can't screw up the way that real estate is sold, because if there was another way, it would have been found before now. Will there be more clarity on the hourly rate the commissioner or the company wants us to charge? You know, I think as we keep moving forward, if we go to an hourly rate, yeah, we're going to have to kind of take a look. And by the way, these are always negotiable, but we're going to find out what is fair and just compensation charged on an hourly rate. What will make us competitive in regards to the market and what our time is worth. So is it right now? It's not set yet, but yeah, that will be coming. All parties agree the seller will contribute 3% of the purchase price to close towards it, and buyer's agent's commission. Yeah. The only thing is that I got a feeling if we just look right now, there's concessions of 3%. Now we're talking commission of 3%. I don't think there's going to be an issue of a broker offering 0 and the buyer says, then, hey, seller, we need you to pay 3%. And oh, by the way, we need 3% in concessions. And you're going, that ain't going to happen. Look, we're in a seller's market now. You haven't seen even a normal market, let alone a buyer's market. People will do what they need to do to be able to make a home saleable. And by the way, just because somebody takes their $100,000 house and says, I'm not going to pay 3% to a buyer's broker. Let's think about this. Is it still worth $100,000? Because if the buyer's got to pay a buyer's broker 3%, and that seller's still expecting to get the 100% as if they were saving 3%, no, buyer's not going to pay it. They'll pay 97. Now, last I knew, 100 less 6% and net them 94,000. If it was then 97 because the buyer's got to pay their own. They're still netting 94. Let's use some logic in all of this as we move forward and talk to sellers about this. But they'll need to know what is going on with that. So I think with that bill, it'll probably be kept separate. I don't think they'll be lumped together. But again, I think mortgage companies, lenders, investors are going to find a way for us to still sell the same amount of real estate in the affordability and the capability as we move forward with this.
I was being
Great
a little
question.
sarcastic. I was being a little sarcastic, thinking, when are we going to start seeing that in offers, though?
I got it, Bill. I don't think it's going to be that long. Now, if we're offering 3% compensation, which I believe our sellers should continue to do. And by the way, now it's going to be the sellers are offering that. Previously, it was 6% and whatever we gave. Now we're going to have to make sure that they know what it is that we're offering as compensation. I don't think it's that long around the corner. I think there's going to be people who jump on this, get crazy, and they're going to have to learn. I think it's still the way that we'll still sell real estate. No. So the question came here, is it date specific? Nope, it's just the lawsuit is settled, or let me rephrase that, has a decision. Anywhere Real Estate, which is a parent company, owner of Coldwell Banker brand, Century 21 brand, ERA brand, Better Homes and Garden brand, they did a settlement that says, here's how we will work with our franchisees, and here's the way that we will work with our corporately owned companies, offices. It's through these settlements that we can kind of see the direction as to where things are going. But yeah, with the actual settlement on the NAR class action lawsuit, that was, you guys pay big and you can't do this anymore. So those were the couple of minor things, but yeah, it's, and that, again, that clarification, NAR is appealing. We're talking 2, 3, 4 years, but adjustments are already being made, which leads me to paragraph number 7 on this. Paragraph number 7. This is updated already. And again, I put it into Remind Docs, into the packages. At any time of any initial contact, designated shall inform all prospective sellers and their agents that designated agent is on behalf of the buyer. Designated agent and supervisory broker will preserve any confidential information obtained during another agency relationship in a prior transaction. It's nice and bold. It's out there. It says that, by the way, you're agreeing to disclose dual agency up front. We just got to notify you when that changes. This is one I actually forgot. I went by it. This is the big change to this document. Is this little 3-line paragraph. Broker's fee for services rendered is not fixed, controlled or recommended by law, the MLS, or any person not a party to this agreement. There's a disclosure that did come out stating this is what we will have to do. NAR made that adjustment. Again, this form is in all packages for Remind Docs Plus, and I'll be working with the others to make sure that we get those updated too. By the end of the year, we will have our own exclusive agency or buyer representation contract.
So this form is on file in my real source. Just not
that
in all
transaction desk, right, Bill?
Yep.
I believe that they would have also updated that form, but it is not likely to be part of your packages. So having worked with transaction desk before, they'll update it, but it won't update automatically. And even Remind Docs Plus, the only thing I do is I get a notification that there's an update to this document. And it's easy to go in and be able to fix that. So the only thing, Bill, if you or see whoever before me, the only thing you've got to do is address the 195 if you go to this, or the, excuse me, the 295 through the end of the year until we get our personal contract up there. You'll have to put it in if you use this form. And by the way, it's already in here for the Remind Docs Plus offices. So if you use it, that is boilerplate in here, that the 295 broker compliance fee. Guys, that's what I've got. And I think I've addressed the questions that I saw in the chat room. What other questions might you have?
You said this would be in the category of Michigan Realtors?
Yeah, it should be under the NAR library. And it would be that paragraph is the obvious change, by the way. Did I really do that great of a job that there's no questions? Thank you. I didn't think I did either.
It was very good, though.
Awesome.
Awesome. It was very helpful.
All right, guys. I don't have anything else coming up. Nobody seems to be coming out with or taking themselves off mute. Wait for it. All right. So we'll bring it to an end. Know that coming out, we will be doing buyer education. We may have to get back into agency all over again, to tell you the truth, but know that we'll be delivering and coming out with buyer education courses, how to actually be able to work with the buyer, doing all the right things and keeping us out of trouble. And how do I actually do a presentation in such a way that they actually say, I'll pay you even more. Yeah. I'm going to give you ideas when we come out, how to be able to collect under contract 4 or 5%. Anybody interested? We'll show you how. Guys, go out, have a great one. Happy Thanksgiving and all the other things if I don't see you or talk to you before then. Have a great one. Okay, you kids got to wait.
Darwin.
Yeah, Bill, go ahead.
He's muted. Great call, Darwin. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you, Luigi. Yeah, Bill, you're muted there.
Yeah, sorry, I took my finger off the keyboard. Under forms, I'm looking at viewing Michigan Realtors. I'm in view, and I'm looking under disclosure.
Yep.
So there's disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships. That's I mean, that's not what I'm looking for.
Should be Form JJ. Not the disclosure, but the buyer representation agreement. Let me do a share again here.
Buyer's acknowledgement and release, buy and sell agreement, buyer and seller for vacant land. Exclusive buyer agency contract, designated agency. I wrote down what you said.
Let me go back and give you the actual. So it's well, the way it's labeled, Michigan Realtors, but exclusive buyer agency contract.
And then it says
designated agency. So like right here, JJ-1. And at the bottom of it, it will have the date. I can't read that. But that date
2023
is yeah.
Oh,
that's how you'll know it's actually updated.
Mine says 2013.
Yep, so they have not updated it in yours yet then.
Okay. And who's gonna tell them to?
My guess would be that NAR automatically submitted it. And it's just a matter of the MLS getting it to transaction desk and transaction desk getting it uploaded. So,
Okay,
again, not a big deal for us right now. These are not something that it's like, okay, these need to be changed immediately, but it is a point of here's where we're highly likely to go. And it is covering us with that disclosure right here. And that was the one thing that came out of this decision that they wanted us to make sure we do.
all right, cool. All right, that's good. I appreciate you. This, I've got an office meeting tomorrow, so it'll be, I'll be able to speak pretty fluently on my Darwinisms.
Well, and if we ever need to cover more of it, I'm a phone call away.
Yep,
Other than
yep.
tomorrow, I have a team meeting here in Rochester too, 9:30. So
I'll be sure to interrupt you.
I can do that. Brenda will be with me.
I'm only kidding. I'm trying something new. I'm doing my office meeting at 11.
Well, we're doing the same thing tomorrow. First time we'll be doing live and Zoom. So
Yeah.
it takes care of those who, for whatever reason, can't make it. It'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Well, a new set of reasons that they can't make it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, my
Have a good one.
friend.
All right, bye-bye.
We'll see you. Have a great one. Bye, guys.